China announced steps to ease its dynamic zero COVID on the 11th of November through the reduction of quarantine requirements and simplification of travel rules. In addition, they have made considerable adjustments to their monitoring process and control regime for the first time since the introduction of the zero COVID policy. Is this the start of a reversal for their unyielding zero COVID policy? Let's explore this in detail. Before we proceed, hit the subscribe button and smash the bell icon for more exciting updates. The zero COVID policy was introduced by many countries at the initial stages of the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic as a measure to control it. Find, test, trace, isolate and support (FTTIS) is the basic concept behind this zero COVID policy, and China became one of the earliest countries to introduce this policy, as it was the first country to experience the outbreak of the virus in 2020. Then they introduced a tight policy to control the spread of the disease. Many other countries used the same strategy to control the pandemic, but as the spread of the disease decreased, many rules were relaxed. However, Xi Jinping's administration made no changes to their initial rules over the next 3 years, causing the economy to slow. Even in October, the Chinese president reaffirmed his commitment to the zero COVID policy during an address to the Chinese Communist Party's 20th Party Congress. This added huge disappointment to the Chinese community, as they were waiting for some kind of relief from these tough rules, which affect their economies badly. These rules shut out foreigners and slowed economic growth. The policy is blamed by many parties as it contributed in creating a shortage in the global supply chain and also delayed the recovery of the aviation and tourism sectors. Even though everyone can see economic growth has slowed, he still wants to persist in zero COVID. This will hurt people's livelihoods, said Simon Chen, a political science professor at National Taiwan University. On November the 11th, it announced 20 tweaks to its zero COVID policy, which relies on mass testing and tight restrictions to control outbreaks. Making a statement regarding the adjustment of their zero COVID policy, the National Health Commission said optimizing and adjusting prevention and control methods are not relaxing prevention and control, let alone opening up and laying flat, but to adapt to the new situation of epidemic prevention and control and the new characteristics of the COVID-19 mutation. Major changes for inbound travelers are hotel quarantine will be cut to 5 days from 7. Travelers will still be required to isolate at home or an additional quarantine for those without a registered address in China, only requiring 1 negative PCR test within 48 hours of boarding a flight to China instead of 2, raising the threshold for counting a PCR test as positive. Key domestic changes include, for close contacts, centralized quarantine is cut to 5 days from 7, with 3 days of home isolation still required. Secondary contacts, that is, close contacts of people labeled close contacts of positive cases, will no longer have to undergo quarantine or medical surveillance. Residents traveling from high-risk areas to other parts of the country will no longer have to spend 7 days in quarantine and instead spend the same period in home isolation. The government will crack down on arbitrary lockdowns and punish those responsible. Many of those restrictions are now slightly less severe. Airlines will be free of suspension of flights if they carry a large number of COVID-infected passengers. Inside China, people considered close contacts of COVID carriers will no longer need to be quarantined. These new rules have prevented mass testing until it is difficult to detect this spreading region. The Chinese government's transparency is extremely low, making it difficult to draw any conclusions based on the data provided by them. Based on the available data, we can conclude that COVID-19 is not controlled up to a satisfactory level in China. However, because they only used local vaccine varieties, Chinese citizens' immunity may not have developed to the same level as that of other countries' citizens. None of the countries have been successful in achieving zero COVID status, and the severity of the impact is only controlled by lowering the number of infections and death rates. The government reported 10,535 new domestically transmitted cases on the day before the update, the highest number in months, and the authorities braced for the situation to worsen. The National Health Commission warned that the epidemic is likely to expand further in scope and scale due to mutations and weather factors in the winter and spring. We must maintain our strategic determination and conduct epidemic control properly and with scientific precision, it said. If vaccinations don't play a big enough role here, the Chinese government will surely have to achieve the zero COVID policy to a certain extent until they find a reliable solution. China has already developed its own vaccines and carried out a vaccination program. But there was a question about the success of these vaccines, and on the other hand, they are refusing to import widely used vaccines developed by Western companies such as Pfizer, BioNTech, and Moderna, as it affects the reputation of the country. Some observers see Xi's strict attachment to the zero-COVID policy as evidence that his government does not believe its own vaccines will prevent against a new wave of infections expected this winter. The Chinese government has strong political reasons to favor domestic vaccines over foreign options. Moving to a foreign vaccine supplier to establish domestic immunity could potentially compromise national security. On the other hand, switching from a domestic vaccine to a foreign mRNA vaccine would also create negative political optics, as more than 2 billion doses of homegrown vaccines had been exported and donated globally to many of the friendly Chinese nations by the end of 2021. According to some reports, they are now trying very hard to develop their own mRNA vaccine. If he gives up this policy, major problems could occur, said Chen, adding that China may also be trying to give itself time to develop its own mRNA-based vaccine, which is considered more effective. However, Victor Gao, a professor at China's Soochow University and vice president of the Beijing-based Research Group Center for China and Globalization, opposes this idea, claiming that the government's position is aimed at prioritizing saving lives and preventing deaths. At the core of human rights in China is life, the right to live, Gao said. Now, you have two ways to deal with the virus. One is herd immunity, and two is dynamic zero-COVID. Herd immunity is dead-end because China's CDC doesn't allow it. It means you have to sacrifice tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people. And if this happened in China, you're talking close to about 10 million people dying because of COVID-19. These new rules were welcomed with both excitement and wariness by the Chinese citizens, as they had been fed up with these tight COVID curbs for over 3 years. These tight pandemic prevention policies of the Chinese government pushed itself into a huge economic disaster, as it limited the operational capacity of most sectors. Unfortunately, the effects are not limited to the Chinese people, as China's malfunction has affected global supply chains, putting excessive strain on the majority of economies. The news of easing the COVID-19 rules has already propelled the Hang Seng Index to its biggest one-day gain in 8 months. This increment is recorded as the most since mid-March, taking the week gains to 7.2%. The tech index soared 10.1%, while the Shanghai Composite Index ended with a 1.7% gain. An index tracking US-listed Chinese companies surged 7.6% in New York overnight. All but 2 of the 73 index members advanced. 10% showed an increment of 11.7% to 258.40 Hong Kong dollars, while Alibaba got a huge jump of 12.4% to 70.80 Hong Kong dollars. JD.com rallied 16.1% to 192.50 Hong Kong dollars, and Meituan advanced 12.5% to 159.60 Hong Kong dollars. Tourism-related industries like Macau casino operator Sands China and Galaxy Entertainment jumped 11.5% and 8.3% respectively. These sudden rises in the stock market are a huge indication of how this unyielding zero-COVID policy has affected the Chinese economy for over 3 years. The move of Chinese government from the zero-COVID policy to the full operational level is very important globally, as the second-largest economy has a crucial role to play in solving the current economic crisis in the world, especially global inflation. The majority of the countries used vaccines made by Western countries, and foreigners who have already completed the full vaccination have sufficient immunity against COVID-19. Therefore, there is less possibility of being infected from COVID-19 from China, except that there is a new variety that is not resistant to those vaccines. The latest updates to these zero-COVID rules have the ability to attract more foreign tourists to the country, and it will be a huge boost to the Chinese economy, as well as to the economies of the people who provide services related to the tourism sector. Travel platform Qunar has reported that search volumes for international flights to mainland China have tripled from the previous day, evidencing that new rules have attracted more visitors from outside. Many parties have praised the new developments regarding the zero-COVID policy for providing a significant boost to the Chinese economy. Bruce Pang, the chief economist at Jones Lang LaSalle, said some interpretations of the new rules and what they might mean for prospects for a full opening were too optimistic. The COVID policy will only be fine-tuned in the short term, he said. It depends on how well the localities execute. I'm afraid to be optimistic, said one user on the Weibo social media platform. Still, the measures were China's most specific COVID easing steps to date and were widely seen as a milestone. This set of substantial changes marks the beginning of the end of zero COVID in our view, City Analyst wrote. We expect the preparation work for full reopening to accelerate with a quick ramp-up of booster vaccinations in the coming months. It is a baby step in the right direction, but the big question looming over all of us is, when is China ready to actually start a vaccination campaign that gives them the herd immunity to really open up the country? Zheng Wuke, president of the European Union Chamber of Commerce in China, said of the new rules. Finally, Xi Jinping's government appeared to realize that there was no point in wasting time on their unyielding zero-COVID policy, because achieving zero status was impractical. With their past statements, it is difficult to go directly into a full modification of existing rules, as it directly affects the fame of their president. So, they will go for the loosening of rules step by step, and a fully operational level of the country can be predicted in 2023. Thank you very much for watching the video. If you liked the video, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss anything about the global economy. See you in the next video. Take care and stay safe.